In this segment of the course, we're going to talk about basic layout skills with HTML and CSS. Now, before there was CSS, people did their layout using tables. I think I mentioned that during the section on tables. But today, that's really considered, at the very least, cheating on the way you do your layout, and it's not a compliant, standards-wise way to do layout. We do our layout with CSS. So part of that is understanding the block model, which I explained earlier, but also understanding how you can lay out and position various divs. So here I've got two logical divisions that I've ID'd as div1 and div2. And to both of them, I've applied a font size, a width in pixels, and a border. Let's just take a quick look and see how this looks. Go ahead and do this in Firefox. And the Firefox browser comes up, and there we go. So that's what we get. So we get two logical divisions stacked one on top of the other. Now, these, as I've mentioned before, are block-level elements. The paragraph is also a block-level element. Notice the space I'm pointing to right here. That's generated because this paragraph, which starts with this opening paragraph tag and closes with this paragraph tag, set it apart from the previous content within div2. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and take div1. And I'm going to set that up so it's not a block level, but an inline element. You can change that using the display rule. And I'm going to change that to inline. Now, when I change it to inline, watch what happens. Let me bring up the browser again, and I'm going to refresh. So notice now it doesn't occupy the block, which is 350 pixels wide. It's now an inline element, so it just kind of goes as wide as the browser is and ends when the line ends. So we get that. We could take the P element, do the same thing. Now again, just to review, notice the P element starts here and ends right there. So now we'll set the rule for the paragraph element. Paragraph. We only have that one paragraph element in here, and we'll take the display and we'll go inline from block. Let's see if that makes any difference in the way it's displayed in the browser. So now that it's inline, it no longer requires its own block and moves back up with the rest of the content. Now, if we had a span in here, because span is inline by default, I'll go ahead and put a span right there, and we'll close the span. That looks like a good place to close it. I could take the span element, and we could set up the span element, so instead of being inline, which is the default, it displays as block. And I think you can predict what's going to happen here, just the opposite of what happened with the paragraph element. So now the content moves around, and this part that's in the span becomes its own block. So block versus inline is fairly easy to figure out and change just using the CSS. Now let's take a look at a couple more properties we can use with the divs. I'm going to go ahead and take out this content right here. We were kind of playing with the block and inline. I'll just use the CSS style comments, which of course, believe it or not, are the same comments you use in JavaScript. All right. And now that we've got those out, let's go ahead and let's play with div1 a little bit. So we already know we can set the width of an element. Pull that back up here. We can set the width of the element just as we have right here. We also can set the height of an element. So if I set the height here, I can set that in pixels as well. Let me set that to 150 px. Now, when it's 150 px, it's not going to accommodate all of the content. It helps if I spell height correctly. There we go. It's not going to accommodate all of the content. Actually, 150 pixels does. Let's bring it down to 100 pixels. Not much content in that first one. All right, and there we go. So notice the content kind of spills out of the div. Here's the border line down here, and it's spilling into the div below it. So what we can do is we can set the overflow rule, which deals with how is the overflow of content handled. And I can set that to hidden. If I set it to hidden, like that, now the content that's overflows will just be hidden. Now, of course, if there's a hidden, there's probably a visible. If I set it for visible, that's the default. And it appears just as it did before. It spills into div 2. Now there's a couple of other interesting options besides visible and hidden. I also can set this to scroll. Now what scroll will do is it'll actually put in a scroll bar here to accommodate the content. So the scroll bar accommodates the content with the width I've set. Now auto is similar to scroll. If I set it to auto, it'll only put the scroll bar if needed. Notice the bottom scroll bar here disappeared. Scroll, if we set it to scroll, it'll definitely put it in the scroll bar. Auto will only set it if needed. So if our content could be accommodated in a 100 height pixel div, then we wouldn't see the scroll bar with it set to auto. So overflow is another interesting way to control our divs. Now we also can position our divs in specific places. Now when it comes to positioning divs, there's a couple of ways we can do that. Now in this introductory course, I don't go over everything about positioning divs, but I want to give you enough to get started. So we can set the position rule to a couple of different values. Now if we set it to a fixed position, and let's say I set that to top 5 pixels, left 100 pixels, and again this is for that div I've called div 1, and we take a look at where it positions it. It's now moving it 100 pixels over and 5 pixels from the top. Now notice because we've taken it out of the flow of divs, kind of the order it's in the HTML, the other div no longer clears it. It now they are one on top of another, which is probably not what we want. But for right now, I'm just going to simply comment out div 2. So I'll use my HTML comment symbols. And now let's take another look here at the... Now this is fixed, and what this means because this is fixed, if there was, let's say, a whole bunch of additional content that was part of this, I'm not going to put this inside a div, but I'm just going to paste a bunch of additional content in here. All right, we're going to save. Watch what happens. As I flow through the page, because this is fixed, that additional content moves, but the div is fixed in its initial position. So that's what fixed does. It keeps it in that initial position. Now, again, if I were to set this to, oops, let's put that fixed back, set this to 100 pixels from the top, then it'll still be fixed, just in a slightly different position. Let's go ahead and open that in our browser. So again, fixed in position. Notice as I move the scroll bar on the right, it remains fixed. Now that's different than if I set this position element to one of the other values. Let's set it to absolute. So now that it's set to absolute, watch, it's going to react a little bit differently with the rest of the content around it. So there we are, Firefox. My favorite browser for testing. Now watch what happens. As I hit the outer scroll bar, it's now part of the page flow, and it moves with the rest of the content around it. So generally people use absolute. There's very rare occasions where you might use fixed. Now, of course, the top and left values are from the top and left of whatever the parent element is. In this case, it's going to be the body. So if we take a look one more time, we're 100 pixels from the top, 100 pixels from the left. So this is the basics of positioning divs. Now, we can position them based on the top and left. We can set the position rule to either absolute or fixed, depending on whether we want the div to move with the rest of the elements on the page.